I'm welcoming Jon today, Jon Stockley. And Jon heads up the Christian Vision for Men in Wales. And I've invited Jon so that he can share more about that. So welcome, Jon. And if you can just give us a little bit of about yourself to start with, okay, before we go into Christian Vision for Men. So just share who you are, where you're based, etc., just so people get a feel for it, okay?
Oh, diolch, Gwyneth. Yeah, so as you said, my name's Jon Stockley. National Director for CVM Cymru, and I live in North Wales now. So I'm what you call a converted GOG.
Okay, come on.
I do love it up here, but my early life was spent down in South Wales. That's where I'm from originally. I started off life in Morriston, just outside of Swansea. But when I was 7 years old, my father had a call into church ministry, and we moved to a mining village called Aberbargad in the Rhymney Valley. That's where I spent the rest of my childhood until I went off to college. Yeah, it was growing up in a Christian home, having I think one of the things that I am most grateful for in my childhood was that my parents introduced me to Jesus. It's the best thing that has ever happened in my life, and they instilled in me a deep, deep love of His Word, the Bible. So as a manual for life, as a guide for every decision that we make. So yeah, that's my background. The reason why I ended up in glorious North Wales is that I married a lovely lady from Chester, and we agreed. This now will give you an insight into my intelligence. We agreed that we'd live halfway between both sets of parents. Her parents in Chester, and my parents down in Aberbargad. So I now live in Penmaen Mawr. She's won that one, isn't she? Yeah, totally.
I'll tell you what, we've got, because we've been chatting before we record this. We've got so much in common, haven't we, Jon? Because I've married a girl from Chester 40 years ago. Not the same one.
Yeah, glad to hear that.
Yeah, that would be odd. But no, I've married a girl from Chester. But you know, the conversations we've had, it's just we've connected. But you know, that's for another day.
Yeah, we've done reverse journeys, haven't we? Actually, because you're from Carnarvon, aren't you, originally? And now you're down in South Wales, and I'm from South Wales, and I'm up here in Penmaen Mawr. So
yeah, I love the way that you've got the Carnarvon right as well, Jon. Well done. You've obviously been practicing, and you know, for a covey like myself, when you hear somebody pronouncing Carnarvon the correct way, just you're on the winning side.
Once you get it, just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? It's hard to pronounce it any other way in the end. So
exactly. Listen, Christian Vision for Men. Okay, tell us a little bit about how that started, and then I want to hear the vision, the heart of the vision of it. Okay, so tell us how it started, and then the heart of the vision of CVM, Christian Vision for Men. Go on.
Okay, so it started probably now. I'm going to say around 35 years ago. So it's not a young ministry in a sense. It's young here in Wales, but it's not young in terms of the ministry itself. There were I think 2 or 3 men that came out of the armed forces, and they were Christian men. They came back into the church, and they realized 2 things. They realized, one, that there weren't as many men in the church as they thought that there would have been. And 2, they realized that the sense of community in the armed forces was stronger than it was in the church.
Okay.
And they were concerned about that. They just felt that God was prodding them to begin to be part of the solution to that, to address that. So what they did was they created a PowerPoint presentation, which they called Winning Men. We still use the concept of winning men to this day, but they created this PowerPoint presentation, and they just rung up a few church leaders who they knew and said, can we come and present this PowerPoint presentation? And they went on a little bit of a tour around England. And they started to formulate the ideas of how can we reach men outside of the church? How can we connect the church then to those men in a positive way? And how can we start to see the balance of women to men, which at that point in time they were saying was around about 70% women, 30% men. How can we get that balance back? And that was it, really. 35 years ago, that's how the ministry started. And then they started to support local churches in terms of starting men's groups and creating an environment where the likes of you and I could invite our next door neighbours, our work colleagues, into something that would make sense to them, but would still have Jesus at the centre of it. And it's just grown from there to becoming a national ministry where our focus is very much on the local church and seeing the local church getting connected to the men in their communities, and how through that it can be a window or a doorway into reaching the entire family, because there are entire families that are just not hearing about Jesus. And what we've learned over the years is that by reaching the man with the gospel, there's a significant chance that we can then reach the rest of the family. So our vision is simply that. It's to say, okay, look, you know what? Actually, we want to see men change their focus, in essence. I mean, I met up with a police commissioner, and I asked him a question. I said, what are the crime statistics when it comes to men? What can you tell me about it? He said, well, actually, 80% of the crimes that are committed across the UK are perpetrated by men. That's 80% of crime that's committed in this country is committed by men. You think, if those men who have clearly built this worldview, this vision, if you like, that means that they can commit crime, they can do whatever they want. If we could change that and their vision became Jesus, well, not only would we see the church grow exponentially, we really would, but we'd also see the whole of society change. And you and I, Gwyneth, we know this more now than probably ever. We need culture, society to completely change and become much more God-focused than it currently is. So our vision is simply, let's change the heart and the focus of men away from whatever they think they can take and just grab or whatever, and actually how can they follow and serve Jesus Christ to make communities and society better.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask you in a moment about the strong connection that you feel needs to be with a local church. Okay, I'm going to ask you about that. But there were a couple of things that, as I was listening to you then, these guys came out the army, okay?
Yeah.
And I would say more so then, but a fairly sort of male-dominated institution, organization, okay?
Yeah, I would say,
so this is the cleverness of God now, okay? So God brings these guys from a very male-orientated, dominated organization, the army, the armed forces, into another community, church, where, boom, it's obvious to them that the balance is wrong. Because it would be more obvious to them than to anybody else, because their background has been a male sort of dominant. When I say dominated, do you know what I mean? I don't mean domination. The majority were male. And so to come into this environment where there's only 30% men would have really opened their eyes. And that was a God thing, I think. But what you say about bringing men to the gospel as well is really important, because if it's a door to the family, the father, the male, is a door to the family. And if the gospel comes into a family through a door that is not the father, there is a great, in my sort of understanding, there's a greater chance of it closing to the rest of the family if it doesn't come through the father. But the opposite is true if it comes through the father, if it comes through the male, that the door is more likely to be opened wide if it comes in through the father. This is a huge, huge thing, isn't it? Huge thing.
It is. I think just to really agree with you there is one of the things I've experienced over my years of being an evangelist to men is that if a man opens a door, he's more likely to hold it open. So as you say, the family comes through, that door stays open.
Yeah.
If somebody else opens that door in the family, the wife or a child, there is a significantly higher chance that the man actually closes the door, stays away from church, influences the children to, well, if daddy's not going to church on a Sunday morning, then why should I? And so basically, the man he's not the most important person in the house. Please hear me that he's not. We're I genuinely believe that the whole family, the husband, the wife, the children, we're all equal and we're all massively important and influential. But there's just something that seems to happen that if the man comes to Christ first, he'll hold the door open and he'll encourage the rest of the family to come through it. But if he doesn't, I don't know whether whether he feels undermined or I don't know what, I mean, there's a whole bunch of tangents we could go off on here, but essentially, if the man has the power to open or close the door, is essentially what we're saying. You're right.
Yeah. So in the conversations that we've had, there's a strong emphasis, isn't there, on connection with local church. You're not looking to do things sort of independently, but you're looking to do things through and supporting local church. Tell us a bit more about that then. Why, how that is an important part of your heart as, Christian Vision for Men.
For me, the local expression of the church is where God does most of his amazing work in that community amongst those people. So for me, if I see a man coming to know Jesus, the very first thing I want to do is get him really rooted in a good local church, to see him flourish within that church, because I think that's where men and their families are going to become everything that God ever intended them to be. Certainly, I wouldn't be able to do any ministry that was in opposition to the church or even in competition with the church, because for me, this is about building local churches, seeing local churches being able to connect well with men in their communities, and actually then seeing that network of churches across the whole of Wales just interconnected and being places where I think it was Thomas Cahill, the guy that wrote How the Irish Saved Civilization, talked about colonies of heaven. And I just think that's where, for me, we're not going to see CVM Cymru groups independently becoming colonies of heaven. But when we are going to see is men being saved through the work that we're doing in collaboration with the local church, creating these colonies of heaven where God's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. That's, for me, it's all about the church.
Yeah. And, that comes over clearly, that you're there not to fulfill your own ministry and build your own ministry, but to build the church by supporting the local church, feeding men into the local church, and hopefully families then as well. So in what are the sort of ways that you do that you support local church in this ministry with CVM?
Yeah, so we are in many ways, we're a resources ministry. So we create resources, write resources. We would refer to our events as being resources, so that local churches are able to host the kind of events that that men are comfortable coming to. It's basically where so up here in North Wales we have what we call a regional breakfast, and what we're always trying to do is create that that environment where guys can bring their mates into that breakfast, and their mates can meet Jesus in a positive way, to make that that first meeting, if you like, really, really positive. Now, of course, what we don't want to do is we don't want to just be, you have to have CVM there for it to be able to do it. So what we're doing in tandem with that is I meet up with church leaders, I meet up with men's group leaders. We look at the ways in which we can tailor the vision of CVM, which is always to reach men and share the gospel with them. But how can we make that work well with the vision of the church? How can that be strategically work well within the wider stuff that the church is doing? How can we enable the men who already follow Jesus, love Jesus? How can we enable them to be able to share the gospel in ways that they feel comfortable with? I often use the analogy that we're all very good, isn't it? Like Saturday after the rugby, we all had an opinion on the rugby, and we can talk endlessly about that. But how can we do that really with Jesus? How can we talk in a way, so we want to train up guys across the church, across the whole of the country, to be able to share their faith, have the kind of events that they can invite their mates to in their local church that are going to be really positive. And in their back pocket, how can they have a resource that they're able to just hand across to that guy and say, actually, if you read this, then it shares a little bit more, maybe even in a better way than I can do it verbally to you. But so basically opening up all the ways in which we can enable men to share their faith well and build the local church.
Because everything that you're saying is to support the local church, to help support the local church, to make it easier in a way to give the local church tools or events or whatever to support the local church. I'm interested to hear again, because you have shared this with me, but I'm interested to hear again how you explained that it was it's a charity, is it? It's a charity?
Yes, it's a charity.
Yeah. So it's a charity, it's an organization, it's a ministry that was set up in England. But in order to set up the ministry in Wales, you were really, really keen to make sure that the identity of CVM in Wales was with Wales as a nation.
Yeah.
Yes? Explain a little bit about that. Explain a little bit what you meant, because I'd like to hear it again. Why that was important to you, having that identity that was for this nation of Wales.
Yeah, so I think.
Am I okay to ask you that question?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I'm just thinking about how I frame it. So I always remember when I was a young kid, a young child. You look in an encyclopedia. If you ever looked for Wales in an encyclopedia, it would say, for Wales, see England. And I don't know if you remember that, but that was just essentially what it was like. And I always felt at that time that can't be right, can it? And I don't think it's right in any walk of life. We are part of
the United Kingdom.
The United Kingdom and part of a group of nations, but we have our own culture and we have our own way of relating to one another. We have our own interests and we have voices in Wales that can speak to people across Wales. And for me, when I took the role on, one of the things that one of the conversations I had very early on with the main office across in Chesterfield was that if I'm going to do this, I need to be able to do this in a way that feels Welsh, that the churches in Wales can own as their own ministry, and also that enables us to just simply speak the language that Welsh people or people living in Wales understand. Now, by that, I'm not just talking about Cymraeg, although I think our Welsh language is fundamentally important to everything that we do. But it's also about cultural language, isn't it, and societal language, and just and what our interests are, and the kind of events that we do. So it's obvious if you look at the wider CVM family, it's obvious that CVM Cymru is different to the rest. We share the same vision. Now, the vision of CVM across the UK is to introduce 1 million men to Jesus, and I love the concept of that. But I'm an ordinary Welsh bloke, and that's an awfully big number. And so we talk about how we can share the gospel with the man next to us, the guy who's in front of us, how we can lead that person, and one by one we lead men to Jesus. And I love the phrase that I can't even tell you where it came from, because it wasn't mine, but somewhere along the line, CVM Cymru adopted a phrase that say, we're going to turn a nation of Wales back to Jesus, one man at a time. I think we're smaller. I think we're smaller just in population. We're smaller in lots of ways, and small isn't always a negative thing. I think for us, it's a really positive thing, because we are fundamentally relational. So I will sit down and I will have coffee after coffee after coffee with church leaders, with men's group leaders, with individual guys. My personality is that I think the word is ambivert, where you're an introvert by
That's
nature.
a new word for me, that, John. That's a new word for me. So you have to explain that one to me.
I will explain.
Ambivert. Ambivert. Okay.
You're an introvert by nature. You've kind of found a way to be comfortable to come out of yourself and speak. So
this is another common. This is another common denominator that we have. Go on.
So for me, I had to have the freedom. We had to have the freedom as a team to be able to do ministry in a way that was that would work well for across Wales, and that's where we came. So our identity. If you look at us on social media, we're very much, we promote the fact that we are a ministry in Wales. The Welsh map is on most of what we do. Red and white is two of our dominant colours. It's nothing wrong to be proud in being Welsh, and I think we can speak into that, and we can redeem that, so that it becomes, we really do want to win this nation back for Jesus.
John,
and that requires all of us in Wales to own the ministry and to help shape that ministry in a way that works for us.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you did that. I'm so glad that God laid that on your heart to give this thing in Wales an identity that the nation can own it. Okay. Because, I'm not sure whether we would be having this conversation even, if it was something that was imported. And I'm not just saying England now. If it was something imported from the US, or from if it's just something imported and is not culturally tailored and sensitive to understand the needs and the culture of Wales, I don't think it would go as far. I don't think the church would engage with it. So that's my opinion as a Welshman, as a Welsh first language Welshman. So you've hit on it, John. Honestly, now it's really, really key to seeing this grow even further than it has. So thank you for that. For being that man in the gap, so to speak, between the excellent work that's going on in England and throughout the UK with CVM, the excellent work, but being that man in the gap that said, hang on, guys, if we're taking this into Wales, we need the identity of Wales on this. And you were that man in the gap. And thank you.
Oh, bless you. Deal.
Listen, tell us a little bit about the fruit that you're seeing, because obviously we're all encouraged when we see things happening, and that you see this ministry is actually, doing what it says on the tin. Yeah. Have you got anything that you want to share with us that will encourage us?
Yeah, two stories, if I can briefly, just in the time that I've been leading the work in Wales, when I first took the role on, which was just a year and a half before COVID kicked in, we had one group in Wales, and that was CVM Swansea group. So they were doing an amazing job down there. They were, I think, even at the time, they were linked in with around 20 churches in the Swansea Valley, and working with those churches. We'd had other groups previously. We'd had other groups in different parts of Wales, but now we're in 2024 now, so we're talking 4 or 5 years later, and we've got the Swansea group still going very, very strong. We've got Cardiff and the Vale. We've got stuff happening in Newport. We've got stuff happening in Aberystwyth. We've got stuff happening in Tywyn across on the west coast, just below the below Penllyn. We're involved with a Welsh-speaking men's breakfast now on Penllyn. We've got stuff happening in Anglesey and Ynys Môn. We've got stuff happening across in Rhyl and
this is all developed in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how long have you been in post? How long have you been in post as national director?
For that time. So basically, I came in 2018. So just in September, it will be 6 years. So so we've had the smile of God. That's how I refer to it.
That's lovely.
Smile of God on us. And we've seen men coming forward and saying, I want to do more with the men that I've got in my community. And so that's one really encouraging story from a strategic point of view. We are now very much a national ministry. From a fruit point of view, in terms of
coalface, I'm talking about the coalface. What's happening?
The coalface stuff. Yeah, we have this lovely story of a guy across on the west coast of Wales who has been walking with his mate for. I'm not going to put a timestamp on it, but it's been a good amount of time. Inviting his mate to come along to events and stuff, and even I believe, I'm going to say this with a little bit of a caveat, I believe even bringing him across to this. We have a UK wide. There's a men's festival called the Gathering that happens in Swindon. I think he even managed to get him across there. But this guy didn't know Jesus. Didn't really have any desire that he was showing, and he's come to know Jesus. But this is the point. Going back to what we said earlier, he comes to know Jesus through that men's group, and then he brings his family with him, and his partner comes to know Jesus as well. And so now, as a family, they are following Jesus. And there are other stories of that. There's also stories where we're seeing guys who have all but lost their faith, and the one thing they've been able to hang on to is enjoying being out with the men's group. So they've stayed in the company of other Christian men, and we've seen their lives turned back around, and that fire being relit. So
brilliant.
It's an amazing. Men respond to the gospel really well in the company of other men, and if you can just get godly men around you, it's just so powerful. It can't be stopped.
Yeah. Oh wow, it's powerful. It is powerful. Listen, I'm just going to ask you one more question now, okay? Just to we'll bring things to a close, and that is, if there was a church minister now, it doesn't have to be a church minister, but if there was somebody now, church minister, let's stick with that, and they haven't got a men's ministry in their church, what would you say to them? I know that you would be there to support and to help, and to, what would you say they're missing as far as having something that is focused on men, if they haven't got one already? What would you say?
Yeah, so let me just say this up front. having a men's ministry in your church doesn't take you to a different league. It doesn't make you better than you were before you had that. So we're not saying that this is the be all and end all, or this is the silver bullet. But what I would be saying is that if we want to see society change, if you want to see your local community change, if you want to work, as we read in Jeremiah, for the prosperity of your town, your city, wherever you are, then investing in men is vitally important, because you only have to watch the news. You know that men create culture, and so often it can be negative culture. So what I'm saying to church leaders is, let's work together. Let's start men's groups up in every single church across the nation. Let's invest in men. Let's change their vision away from whatever it is, even if it's not bad, but it's not Jesus. Let's change their vision back to Jesus, and let's see families who, let's face it, even with all the other stuff that's going on in society, in the world right now, their basic and greatest need is to know Jesus. We can work together to make that happen. We can see your community change, and we can actually see, and I genuinely believe this, that we can see Wales become the land of revivals once again. But I do think a significant, not the most important, but certainly a significant part of that work to turn this nation back to Jesus is seeing men have their vision changed from whatever it is right now to being front and center Jesus Christ. But we can work together on that.
I'm not going to ask you to give the contact details, okay? Because I will put those in the description. I'll get those off you. I'll put them in the description for anybody who wants to contact you, and it'll be fairly easy to do that. A phrase that came to me, and I've shared this already with you when we spoke a couple of weeks ago. A phrase that came to me, and I want to repeat it again because it's still with me, is that Christian Vision for Men, CVM, is a friend to the church that the church doesn't yet know it has. Do you remember me sharing that?
Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah, CVM is a friend to the church, but the church doesn't yet know that it's a friend. And so I would want to encourage, church leaders, but I'm not limiting it to church leaders, but whoever's got this heart for men, and who wants to sort of invest in that ministry, to just get in touch with Jon, because Jon is a friend personally to me. Jon is a friend, but this ministry is a friend to the church, and in some cases the church doesn't know that it has this friend that it can draw for wisdom and draw for ministry and draw for support. So CVM is a friend of the church, and the church doesn't always know that it has this friend that it can call on. So I think that's a great place to finish, Jon. Do you?
I think so. And that is exactly what our heart is and our vision is to be to the church. So yeah, let's finish there.
Lovely. Listen, thank you very much. And I'm sure that we will have opportunity to share again like this at some stage.
Yeah, okay? I do hope so.
Yeah. But for now, Jon, really appreciate your time and just the wisdom that you bring. And I want to thank you again that you have given CV, and I'm a little bit emotional about it, to be honest with you.
Thank you. Yeah.
That, you brought, as George North said, there's a bit of dust in the air, isn't there? When he was being interviewed and getting a little bit emotional that it was his last match. But I want to thank you that with CVM Cymru, you stood in that gap and you brought an identity for the nation for this, because it's so important. Okay? Thank you. Leave it at that. All right? God bless you.
Proud.
See you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.